Please be seated. Right up this way, please. Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead and have a seat. State your name and spell it, please.
Jon Turbett, that's Jon. Last name is Turbett, Turbett.
Go ahead, counsel.
Sir, what area did you grow up in?
I actually was born and raised in Cedar Rapids, and I've lived in Dubuque for about the last 20 years.
Did you graduate from high school?
Yes, I did.
Where did you graduate from high school?
Kennedy High School.
Did you receive any additional schooling after that?
Yes, I have a 4-year degree, a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science, and a law degree from the University of Iowa College of Law.
And what is your current occupation?
I've been employed by the Iowa Department of Public Safety for 19 years, specifically their Iowa's Division of Criminal Investigation, sometimes called the DCI.
Can you just explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the DCI is?
So I'm employed as a special agent, a certified police officer. Probably easier to explain that as a plainclothes police detective during my career. And I'm actually inside of the DCI assigned to a smaller unit that's referred to as the Major Crime Unit.
And you indicated that your title is special agent?
Yes.
And what kind of cases do you work on?
So as the title of our unit is the Major Case Unit, we really work any kind of state law violations, but a lot of those tend to be what would be deemed major cases. So a lot of those are felonies. We also are involved in most of the officer-involved shootings in the state of Iowa, as well as public corruption cases.
What are some of your duties being a special agent for the DCI?
So we're what's called a rural assistance agency, so we're basically on 24/7 call-out, and local police departments, sheriff's offices, other state agencies or federal agencies can call, and we would send our special agents to assist with criminal investigation in really all kinds of matters, but I work quite a bit of homicide, sex abuse, child abduction, those kinds of things.
Now, Agent, did you become involved in the murder investigation of Amy Mullis?
Yes, I did.
How did you become involved in that?
So I had some information, very little on the day of that, I believe. My immediate supervisor, special agent in charge, Mike Craffle with the DCI, had said that he'd had some conversation with the Delaware County Sheriff's Office about the death of Amy Mullis. At that time, my understanding was local law enforcement had said that it had been reported by the defendant as being a fall or an accidental death. My supervisor had talked to the Delaware County Sheriff's Office and consulted with them a little bit on what they should do that day, and then an autopsy was scheduled as is normal for that Monday, 2 days later.
What day did you become involved in this investigation?
I was called by Delaware County Sheriff's investigator Travis Heemseth right after the autopsy on that Monday, November 12th, 2018.
And you learned information based on the autopsy?
Yes.
What involvement did you have at that point?
So at that point, the Delaware County Sheriff's Office officially requested DCI assistance. I was assigned to be the primary point of contact for the DCI to work with local law enforcement and provide any investigative assistance that was needed.
And just briefly describe to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, when you're conducting an investigation such as this, what are some of the duties or jobs that you do in this type of investigation?
So we would work with our local partners and in law enforcement, and we would help them manage the case, identify what leads need to be followed. We would bring in whatever personnel was needed in addition to myself to help follow those leads. And that would involve things like processing the crime scene, and certainly one of the things we do a lot of is interviewing or interrogating.
Shortly after you were involved in this investigation, did you learn information that Amy Mullis was having an affair?
Yes.
And based on that information, what did you do?
So that was learned, I had heard that almost immediately, and so the day after I became involved and started to work with the Delaware County Sheriff's Office that Monday, Tuesday I actually went out and began to conduct interviews immediately. Some of those with friends, those closest to Amy, and then also the person that I was becoming aware she was in a current affair with.
And would that be Jerry Frazier?
Yes.
Did you actually have a conversation with Jerry Frazier?
Yes, on November 14th, so just 2 days after the autopsy, I actually located Jerry Frazier and interviewed him.
And approximately how long did that interview take place?
I believe that was about an hour and a half.
And what was the nature of your conversation with Jerry Frazier?
So I met Jerry. He sat in the next to me in my unmarked police vehicle, and we talked for an hour and a half. And he very quickly disclosed, he was forthcoming about the extent of his relationship with Amy, that he was involved in a romantic and sexual relationship with her since May of 2018, and in fact that they were still romantically and sexually involved up until the point of her murder.
And did Jerry give you any information or any additional information, I'll say?
So after we covered the background of his relationship with Amy and the details of that and how they communicated and some of those things, he provided me his cell phone number, his Gmail account, because he told me they had in fact communicated by way of Gmail as opposed to text messaging at some point in their relationship. And then I asked him to provide an account for his whereabouts on Saturday, November 10th, the day of Amy's murder, and also who else would be able to corroborate or validate his whereabouts on Saturday.
And did you then speak with additional people after talking with Jerry?
Yes, I took those names and followed up and spoke to those individuals as well.
And who were those individuals?
His college-age son and his wife.
And what were you able to confirm on that from that date, from the date of, November 10th, 2018?
So both individuals corroborated exactly what Jerry had told me about his whereabouts on Saturday. In fact, his college-age son had excellent recall. He didn't normally come home on weekends. His dad had asked him back to complete a specific project that Saturday morning. And so they had gotten up and spent all Saturday morning doing work, and then they watched college football. And he actually had really good recall about all the games. And so he went through that day that he spent with his dad, as well as the fact that the mother, Jerry's wife, Christy, had actually called. She was running, helping on a volunteer team all day with a volunteer benefit event for someone in their community. A young man had passed, and Christy had been spending all day at the community center. She actually had called Jerry and their college-age son and asked them to pick a few items up and bring them over to her in the afternoon. And so she and the son both confirmed Jerry's whereabouts and that he was with the son all day.
And at that point, was Jerry Frazier a person of interest?
He was.
He was initially, correct?
Initially. And then after those interviews, and then from my conversations with him and the others, we sought a search warrant. A judge authorized search warrants both for his cell phone records, his cell phone activity, as well as his Gmail records, because we knew that was a primary means for him to communicate with Amy. So we gathered all of that data. That took some time and looked at that, and then he no longer was a person of interest after all of this investigative effort.
And were you able to confirm that Jerry was in the Anamosa area from 10:40 till that afternoon?
Yes, part of the analysis of those cell phone records allows us to see which cell phone towers, just like your cell phone or mine, where his call activity was at on Saturday. And we could see that Jerry Frazier's cell phone had cell phone activity around 10:45, 11:45, 12:45, all of that down in Anamosa, a good 45 minutes or so away from the murder scene. So that went right over the time frame of the homicide.
And you indicated that you were able to talk to Jerry's wife, Christy Frazier.
Yes, I spoke to Christy.
Was she ever a suspect?
No.
Why not?
Christy's whereabouts, again, were accounted for. She provided that she was working on with this charity event all day along with other members of the community. The son also understood. His mother had said that's where she was at. Jerry understood that as well. So there was no concern about that.
As part of your investigation, did you conduct an interview of the defendant, Todd Mullis?
Yes.
And was that on November 16th, 2018?
Yes, that was the first time that I spoke to the defendant.
And where did that interview take place?
I invited him to come to the Delaware County Sheriff's Office in Manchester to talk to me.
Was anybody else present for that conversation?
Initially, the sheriff, John LeClaire, made some introductions that would be pretty normal. He had some familiarity with the defendant. I did not. So the sheriff made some introduction and then politely stepped out of the room after several minutes, and then it was just the defendant and I for about the next 2.5 hours or so.
Approximately how long did that conversation last?
The two of us talked for about 2.5 hours before we moved on to some other things.
And was that interview both video and audio recorded?
Yes, the Delaware County Sheriff's Office has an interview room that video and audio records for us.
And Agent, can you just explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, how did that interview start and what was the first portion of that video?
So as with every interview we conduct with victims, witnesses, and suspects, there's quite a bit of background conversation. So I asked Todd about his upbringing and where he's lived. We talk about his parents, his two brothers, talk about how he met and married Amy, go through some things, their children, and also his work and some of those things.
And did you then, after that portion, did you ask the defendant specifically about Saturday, November 10th, 2018?
Yes, I did. We actually talked about his marriage, and then we actually do. I asked him if we can talk specifically and in great detail about Saturday, November 10th.
And what does the defendant indicate to you at that time?
About Saturday?
Yes.
So he goes through his, I ask him to spare no detail, no details too small, I'd love to hear everything, and he walks me through his day Saturday.
And if you can give a summary of what the defendant indicated.
He said that morning that he had gotten up, he and his teenage son, Tristan, he has two other small children, Wyatt and Taylor, but he and Tristan actually go off the farm, I believe over to his brother's place. They're contemplating doing some field work that day, but it's too cold. And he tells his brother that they're not in fact going to do field work and that they've decided to go back to their home, their farm, and they're going to work in the hog building and they're going to hang heaters that day since it's too cold to actually do field work. So they return to their home that morning. I believe he says that's about 8:30. They actually go in the house. They have a little bit of breakfast, a piece of toast and some water, and they're talking. Amy is up and working on a puzzle. And so he tells me about that, and then the plan is for all three of them to go out into the hog building and work together, which they then do through that morning. He says during the course of that time of work, he's quick to point out to me on two instances. He says in particular, he looks over, he's watching her, and she's kind of dizzy. And he says he's concerned and she's really not doing any good. And he tells her, why don't you just go into the house? And so before he tells her to go in the house, he says, why don't you stop and pick up a pet carrier, which is over in this red shed. And so he said, just stop over there, grab that, set it down over here on the other side of the drive, the parking lot, and then go to the house. And so he says that's his understanding as to what she did. Sometime later, I believe he tells me about maybe 20, 30, 45 minutes later, I think he puts on the high side. He happens to look out and notice that the pet carrier he's asked her to go and get and set over by the other building is not there. So he sends Tristan over to the red building to see what's going on with his mother and why that didn't get accomplished. He says Tristan then sounds the alarm and says something's wrong. And Todd goes over and finds Amy face down in kind of a crouched position with a corn rake in her back. And he says that he tries to, pick her up and move her. He can't because the corn rake is hitting things. So he puts his hands on the corn rake, manipulates the corn rake, pulls it free, throws it to the side, and then is able to take her and put her into his vehicle with Tristan opening the door, and they begin to head towards the hospital and call 911.
And he actually demonstrates for you the way in which he found Amy when he was called over to the red shed.
That's correct.
Now, before you gave us that summary, you indicated that at some point you asked the defendant how his relationship was with Amy.
Yes.
And what did he initially indicate to you?
Told me his marriage was great. It was very good. They had good communication. He talks about it, them being very open. He uses the word open or openness very much. He describes himself as being very loving and kind and comforting with Amy. And he says, like any marriage, when something comes up, he's able to bring that to her, or she's able to bring things to him, but that they have a very healthy marriage.
Did you then ask him if there's ever been any problems or any affairs in their marriage?
Yes.
And what did the defendant indicate to you?
So the defendant does tell me that about 5 years prior, Amy had been involved in an affair. And we talk about that, and he tells me that he has to confront Amy about that affair. And we go through the details of that, and then I said, did you have to confront her about any other such things? And he says, no.
After you asked the defendant that, what did you say?
So knowing at this point in the investigation already, I've already talked to Amy's friends that are aware of the now current affair with Jerry Frazier. I've actually met with Jerry Frazier at length, and he's provided all of the detail and has told me that Todd had confronted he and Amy and Jerry's wife. Todd is not providing that to me, so I try to prompt that again. I try and take a different angle. So my next immediate topic is, hey, do you know Jerry Frazier? Tell me about your relationship with Jerry. And then,
at that point, does the defendant tell you anything about suspecting a relationship between Amy and Jerry Frazier?
No. At this point, he tells me that the relationship he has with Jerry is business, that Jerry works for JBS and is subcontracted basically to come in and provide these hogs and take care of them. And so I do ask him, well, can you describe Amy's relationship with Jerry? Again, trying to provide another opportunity for him to disclose this current affair. And again, he just tells me that, well, Amy also has some business interaction with him because she works on the farm with me.
What did you do then in the interview?
So at that point, with him still not having disclosed the second affair, despite my best efforts to give him opportunity to do so, I actually take a break and offer to go get him a glass of water. So I step out of the room for about 3 minutes and get myself a glass of water, and I bring the defendant a glass of water and set that down for him.
And when you come back in, is that when the defendant then, what does he say then to you?
So at this point, apparently having thought about this for 3 minutes or so in silence, he decides at that point, he said, actually, there is something I need to tell you. I did have concerns about Amy and Jerry.
And Agent, you've recently watched your 2.5-hour video of the interaction or the interview that you had with the defendant on that date.
Yes, I have.
And were you able to make a clip that indicates the part that you just summarized for us?
Yes.
Your Honor, Your Honor, I'll mark this as State's Exhibit number 113. Agent, prior to testifying, did you provide me with a clip of what you just summarized?
Yes, there were 2 clips provided on the thumb drive to you.
And the first clip on that thumb drive, is that a true and accurate copy of the actual recording or the interview that you conducted with Todd Mullis on November 16th, 2018?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask that State's Exhibit number 113 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection?
Your Honor, the state may be aware of this morning. I don't have any objection, but I guess since it's going to be a snippet or a clip from sections, it may lead to playing the whole thing, but this will be our first opportunity to see it, but at this point I don't object.
Okay. We'll keep the door open to the defense playing other portions of that recording if necessary, but 113 is admitted into evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. May I publish it to the jury?
Yes.
Afterwards, when we actually bonded really is actually better because we kind of heal together.
Just a moment, Judge. I just want to make sure. I think if you're there.
I don't think it really, I think he kind of grew out of it, Describe you and Amy's relationship to me. How would you describe it after that, let's say the last 5 years? How would you describe your marriage to me? Very healthy, actually. Yeah, communication was great. We were together all the time, and we, it was good. It was great until the end. Well, other than this last, dealing with her female problems, she was going up and down, and she'd be upset, and I would try and comfort her, and try and get her, she had trouble sleeping because of that, but yeah, between us, it was good. Yeah. Between us, it was good. Last 5 years, was there, would you classify your marriage one where there was lots of arguing, or that's not at all? No, we argued, didn't fight. No, okay. What were the words you used to talk to her? Were you a loving husband? Would you say you were kind to your wife? And as anybody else, always love you. Or it looked great. So after that, you said you made some commitments to one another and did the counseling and did that. Any other problems in that area? Was there ever any other problems? I mean, there was always she was very open, and she knew that I always told her that, I gotta be able to, trust it, you gotta feel that. But it was good, She was like, hey, I'm just wrong with, she was open. She was real open with me. Yeah. Which you have to be in marriage, so, and I felt good about that. Yeah. Right. Were you, okay. Were you, this is ever after this first deal, or were you willing to let it go? I mean, it was so open, it was like, it was open, I guess it was if I had a question or I didn't feel right, I would say, and then she'd play it, and it was no big deal. It meant to say I was uncomfortable with something, or she was uncomfortable with me, and it was just, just talking up. Yeah, let's sit across from each other and try and, Did you ever have to confront her again? Was there ever any other no situations? Okay. Well, no. Okay. So come Saturday, other than she was just working through some issues with her bleeding and some of the, she did say she was, I think I'm bleeding again, and that was, she said, I think I'm bleeding a little bit. Was that on Saturday? No, not Saturday, but I don't know, I mean, she just, I had asked her every day, bleeding, well, a little bit, and then, I think I'm bleeding a little bit. Whatever, So you said things were good, marriage was good leading up to this, other than she's just working through some issues and you're being sensitive as a husband to help her. Well, yeah, you're kind of watching out for her, Yeah. Okay. and you got questions, whatever, How long have you known Jerry? Since I started with dogs. Yeah, how long's that been? 2012. So when you built that first one, that's when that relationship with Jerry started? I think it was the right way. Okay. And how does that work? So he's not employed by you? Or is he? JBS. Okay. And so Cargill years ago. Cargill out of Cigarette? No, it was Cargill at first and they switched it to JBS. Okay. And how's that working? Because you're not paying him directly? Do you pay JBS for a service or how's that working? As far as how JBS, how's it work? So you own the hog. Yep. Now tell me, how's JBS get involved? How's this happen? Just explain it to me. They rent spaces. JBS rent spaces from you? Okay. And what's Jerry's role in this? He's an employee of JBS. We call him a field manager. Yep. And what's he do? He basically comes out if we need him, checks on the pigs, says you should run meds, this and that. Okay. And he's been doing that for you since 2012? Yes. Okay. And your relationship with him, how often do you see him? Is that a weekly thing? Monthly thing? It could be a weekly thing. It could be... it just depends what time of year it is, or what stage of the pigs. Right. So pigs are newer, he's maybe being more attentive, or he's out there more when you get... Well, when you get pigs in, he might be there more often. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. You should run more meds, or less, or... Yeah. This and that and the other thing. Yeah. Okay. And your relationship with Jerry, was that strictly a business relationship? Did you guys become friends or anything like that? It was good. We had, one time he gave us tickets to Monticello Fair. Oh, yeah. To the, is it the Jones County Fair. They put on, that's a big county fair. Mm-hmm. Okay. What about Evie? Did she have a relationship with Jerry, or how did that go with them? Yeah. Tell me about that. I relied on her to do a lot of the interactions. Mm-hmm. It's just like the normal guy coming around, like, hey, Jerry and get one that ordered. Okay. I didn't know she did. Okay. And that was her, she had some of the business interchange with Jerry. Yeah, okay. Anything else that we didn't talk about that you think would be important for me to know? You mentioned your relationship with your boy at the start. I thought it was pretty cool. You said, he's 13 now. Does he get to spend a lot of time with you, with Dad? With me? Yeah. Yeah. He's in school, obviously. Yeah, he's in school, and then after school, is he working with you after school? Once in a while. Yeah. If I'm close. Yeah. Before school, or different? No, he gets up and just goes to school. Yeah, but after school, sometimes when you're close by or when you're around, yeah, weekends, does he get to hang out with you? Okay. He's gonna... We're close. Yeah, you're close. He look up to you? I think so. Yeah, I think he's my buddy. Yeah. No? Yeah. No. You bet. For real. Good deal. Okay. Tell you what, are you good? Can I grab you a drink of water real quick? I just want to check on one thing. Are you good? Hanging tight for a second? Sure. Yep. Can I give you a drink of water? See if I can grab one for you? Are you good? Go on. Okay. I'll be right back. much to it. Okay, so you said you had a conversation with Jerry, or was it with Amy? I was confused. Actually, both of them. With both. I just said, hey, if you need something, the thing I had with Jerry is, I said, if you can just ask me, instead of always texting me. Okay. So were you worried about, because Amy was... Well, I mean, you know, it was, I guess, it was just making me feel uncomfortable. Kind of like I said, we were open. Yeah. And I just said, Amy, I said, just, if it's okay, I just said, don't. If you need something, just have him text me, because I just, if you don't want to laugh, and it's like, well, maybe I had a little suspicion, but it was just, whatever, you know, I just wanted to feel comfortable. Yeah. And then, it was simple, it was a real simple deal. With me, you know, Jerry was real comfortable with it. Yeah, when was that? Probably June. June of this year? I'm guessing. Was that face-to-face, or? No. It was just a phone call, and I said, hey, you don't mind, it's just... Did something cause you to have that conversation, and what made you... I just had a bad... No. I don't remember what it was. I think I seen her phone, and there was a lot of text there. Okay. And I just said, well, I go, don't be... I said, it does not make me feel comfortable. Yeah. You know. And when you say that, well, when you're not comfortable, are you thinking back to 5 years prior? Almost. Yeah, it just says, I'm not accusing nobody of nothing. Just, you know, just inside where you... Yeah, I just kind of had a bad feeling, and then I just said, hey, and then I just called him and said, hey, just, if you could just come to me, oh, that's a problem, no problem. And then you had a conversation with Amy? Same time frame? And how'd that go? Tell me about that. What was that conversation? It was kind of awkward at first, and then it was just... That was face-to-face? It was face-to-face. I don't remember. No, it's probably. But it was a tough conversation, though, right? Like you said, it was awkward. Actually, well, yeah. And you're having flashbacks to... Yeah. So, tell me about that conversation. What did she say about it? She just said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, I said, come on here, you know, it's just this uncomfortable feeling, you know? Yeah. And she goes, oh, okay. Well, what do you think I'm doing something? And I go, I'm not accusing you of nothing. I said, just want to be fine, you know? Or I did. I just told her that she was, okay, well, if that makes me feel more comfortable, then I think she kind of didn't understand at first. She goes, well, I got to talk to him. I said, well, yeah, that's fine. I don't care if you overfeed, but just don't make it about pigs or something like that, because he should show pigs and all that. Just kind of keep it professional, you know? Yeah. Yeah. So you didn't want her to talk about the pigs with him, or? Well, no, the pigs, but he had to show pigs and whatever, you know? And were they talking about show pigs? Well, it was that time of year they were showing pigs. Yeah, who showed? Did he show pigs? Or did he show pigs? And then they were talking about Taylor showing the pigs and all that. Like, so he and Amy were starting to have conversations about showing pigs. So things other than the hog barns. Yeah, and I said it was not here. Just said I wasn't comfortable with it. It was getting friendlier than you wanted. Yeah. Not business at that point. Well, I thought. Yeah. Did Jerry deny having an affair with Amy? He said he denied it. Yeah, he denied it. He just said, hey, dude, there's nothing going on. No relationship, no sex, no. What about Amy? Did she deny it? She denied it. Well, she just said, it's just, you know, no, there's no sex. Just, did you believe her? I did. Yeah. I did. They were both open about it. I mean, yeah. And that was it. After he said no and she said no. And I just said, I don't care if you need to contact her. Just keep it with the Barnes. Just keep it with the Barnes. And I said, and then I don't care. I said, just don't do it so often, you know. If it's a, you know, whatever. And these two conversations, one with Jerry, one with Amy, they happened in about June of this year? I think it was, yeah. Pretty close to that. And after the two conversations, do you put this to rest then? Have you had any follow-up conversations? I've never had any. No. And just talked to him the other day. And no further conversation with Amy? Not at all. Okay. And in your mind, was it put to rest? Actually, it was. I felt you were done. There's no. I let it go. I mean, they both. It was kind of a. As long as we're straight with each other and honest, and then, he calls me, whatever, it was just no comment, it was nothing, that was it. That was it. It was just that one, after June, that was it. Okay, tell me.
Agent, a minute ago I asked you, before we looked at that clip, I asked you about whether or not you asked Todd to summarize what happened on Saturday, November 10th, 2018. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And at any point during that summary, did you ask Todd if anyone else was on the farm that day?
Yes, I did.
And what was Todd's response?
He told me no one was on the farm that day except him, Tristan, Amy, and the two smaller children in the house.
And did you go further and ask Todd if he has any workers or anybody else that generally works at their farm?
Yes, I tried to clarify if there was the possibility of any working men or hired hands or anyone that would also be on the property for some reason.
And what was Todd's response to that?
He said there was no one else on the property that day.
Now, Agent, as part of your involvement in this case, did you learn about the results of the medical examiner's report
Yes.
or conclusions?
Yes.
And how did you learn about that?
I'm provided a copy of the autopsy report when it's finalized. As part of the investigative team, I also had the opportunity to have some conversation with the state medical examiner that conducted the autopsy, Dr. Cruz.
And when you spoke to Todd on November 16th, 2018, were you aware of the fact that this was considered a homicide?
Yes, I had been told at that point that the medical examiner believed this was now a homicide.
And at that point, was the medical examiner's report released yet?
No, that was completely inside of the closed circles of the investigative and prosecutive team.
So the public had not heard yet that this was deemed a homicide?
No, it was still being considered an accidental fall to the public.
During your conversation with Todd on November 16th, 2018, did you tell the defendant that Amy's death was a homicide?
Yes, I did.
And what was the defendant's reaction when you told him that?
No time after I tell him that does he deny and say, no, I did not kill my wife. In fact, as I proceed for the next 35 plus minutes to tell him the evidence is very clear, in fact, it is a homicide and you killed Amy, the most I get from him, it's a very flat emotional affect. He says, how? And he says, what evidence do you have? And you tell me what the police know, but never, no, I didn't kill my wife.
Did Todd ever react to the fact that you just told him his wife was killed on his property by somebody?
No.
And did he ever in that 35 minutes deny killing Amy?
No. And at no other time did he.
Did he ever at that point tell you that there was somebody else on the farm?
No, he did not tell me to look for anyone else that killed her.
Did he give you any ideas of any suspects or anybody with any motive to kill Amy?
No.
And did he tell you at any point that he heard anybody else come onto his farm that day?
No, he did not.
And how would you describe Todd's reaction when you, for 35 minutes, confronted him with the fact that his wife was killed?
Well, I've done this dozens and dozens of times over the course of my career, and this is a very unemotional, very flat. He just sits there. Like I said, a few statements about what evidence I actually have, but no denial. And then he just sits and listens, very contemplatively. He looks at me, looks off in the distance. Sometimes he looks down as he's considering everything that I say. As I continue to tell him, the evidence at this point is overwhelming. This is, in fact, a homicide. You did kill Amy. He just sits there.
Judge, can we approach?
Yes. Okay, folks, it's just about noon. The prosecution intends to show another clip from that video, and that clip's going to be a little bit longer than the first one, and over the lunch hour, we're going to work on getting better audio so that you can hear it better. So we're going to take our lunch break at this time. Remember the admonition I gave you before. We will start back up again at 1:15, report back to the jury room.
All right, to the jury.
Please be seated, everyone. Okay, Ms. Hughes, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Agent, you just, prior to our lunch break, you summarized a part of your interview with the defendant where you indicated to him for the first time that this was a homicide. Is that correct?
Yes.
And was a clip of that portion of your interview on the disc that you gave me prior to your testimony?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask to be allowed to publish clip 2 on State's Exhibit number 113.
Go ahead.
I mean, there's a couple pains back here, so, but that's where she was. Well, Todd, we've completed our investigation at this point, and the case base clearly shows that we're responsible for Amy's death at this point. I'm responsible. So, Todd, the state medical examiner that did this autopsy, those are the top of the line doctors. They get no better. And they analyze that body, and they work with not just the doctors at the state medical examiner's office, but they have colleagues across the country, experts in autopsy of the human body, some of the best doctors in the world, Todd. And they go through this, and they analyze this, and they have a consultation, and those doctors as a team generate a final and complete report. And they're able to take, as you know, people were out there with measurements and everything, and they recreate the scene, and they can look at that body, and that body tells them a story, and it tells them a story like never before. This is 2018, so when they're able to look at something, that body tells them a story. Science tells them a story, so they're looking at things like the wounds, and the entry points, and the depth, right? And a number of things, right? The body begins to tell this one. So just like you're sitting here, I can see you got a black shirt on or a pair of blue jeans, they start to unfold that body, and it starts to talk to them, and it tells them scientifically exactly what happened and what didn't happen. And it's very, very clear. And it tells the who, the what, the when, the where. Those questions start to get answered with absolute certainty. The thing that the body doesn't tell is the why. And that's our job. Our job is to work through this and figure out the why something like this happens, Todd. And I think at this point, the why has become more and more clear in this situation. As you and I see here, that really from a week of investigating and a team of investigators. So I am a special agent with the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation. I'm a major crimes detective, and not only do this work, things like this, and we were called in to assist here, and we've been investigating thoroughly. And at this point, what I can say is, Todd, is this Saturday was something of the culmination of a perfect storm for you and Amy. There were a lot of things going on, not just in this week or in the months before, but in the months and years building up to this. Are you familiar with the term perfect storm? Have you heard of the perfect storm? Yeah, there's movies, there's books, right? And you know that concept is a boat goes out on the sea, right? And everything looks good, right? They get the fishing boat or whatever it is, and they get out there and everything looks good. Well-intentioned, heading out there and they get going. But at some point they get out away from land, away from any point where they're going to get back anytime real soon. And maybe they start to catch reports, right? I mean, it's 2018, and they keep continue contact, and hear things, or maybe they see something in the distance, but pretty much unbeknownst to that boat, what's been going on, Todd, is we've got currents and wind temperatures and all kinds of things that are taking shape. You get all these forces of nature that are working in a perfect storm. There's very few of them, and they actually converge on a single point in time, Todd. And when I talk to you, and when I spend my time talking to all the people in your life and Amy's life, and we're looking at all that electronic data, right, that's available out there, which is, there's a ton of it. And that's what we do. Our job is to have analysts sift through all that, to talk to people, right? And what I see is I see a lot of perfect storm elements that are circling around you, Todd, a lot of pressures that are weighing in on you. We had that first affair about 5 years ago. What did you know about that? Absolutely know about that, Todd. We know about, I know about that first affair. I know how hard that hit you and the family. I know what that did to your trust with me. I know that shattered trust. And I know that wasn't a one and done, that things just were, left behind after a few counseling sessions. I know the baggage from that lingered, both in her life and in your life, such that your relationship was never the same. And there was a lack of trust, and there was a level of suspicion, rightfully so, Todd, because you're right. As you start to have your children, I know your children are very, very important to you. I know Tristan and Taylor and Wyatt are very important to you. And I know you work really hard at your farm, and and something that you want to pass on to your children. I get that farming's come down to generations. Yeah, but I didn't even have this farm. And I know that all that's there, and you're trying to be a good dad in the midst of Amy not really pulling weight in some ways, right? I mean, that'd be putting it nicely. To say that she's out having sex with another man that time, that's devastating. That's right. And that's 5 years. That's a devastating storm on the horizon. But then to have this again in 2018, you say, oh man, not again. Jerry, again. And you had suspicions, and you were right to have suspicions. And you were worried about things going on between the two of them. And there was the confrontation you had with Jerry. He actually went out and confronted Jerry's wife. You called her and went talking to her on a couple occasions. Remember the conversations with Amy. Remember all these things going on. And Todd, you were feeling the stress of a lot of things in your life at this point. And that lack of trust was gnawing away. Here you are trying to put in hard yards, work the farm, do the right thing, cultivate that relationship with your kids. Tristan is coming up. He is a young version of you, right? He is where he is dad. You should be very proud of him. And you want to hold this family together, you told me, so bad. But that's not chief on Amy's mind. It is on some days. But Amy is, I don't know what she was thinking every day. Taking care of Amy's needs. I don't know what she was thinking. I asked her so many times. But she thought it was all this moment stuff. And she's chasing after Jerry and pursuing that relationship even after. She's not worried about you. In fact, her conversations are, what portion of the farm would she get if she left you? And what would happen with the kids? Could she walk out clean? Could she walk out clean with some of your farm? Or could she take some of that away from you? I knew that was going on, and you thought about those things. You were worried and contemplating what she could do if she tried to rip that away from you. And so all these perfect storm elements, Todd, they're brewing. They're brewing. And this is all still very much fresh. And then we come to Saturday. And it's not just another Saturday. It's not just another nice day out at the hog barn and doing some chores. Things got out of hand. I know they did. I know for a fact now. We can look at that and we can see the evidence. And here's the deal with this, Todd. The evidence will drive this thing. It will drive it. The evidence will tell the story of what happened. It'll tell the who, the what, the when, the where. But what that evidence is, it's cold, it's indifferent. So when that evidence is laid out, and it tells what happened, that's cold. But explanation that you and I are doing here, that's warm. When people can understand the perfect storm and the things that are going on and the stressors you were under, and things that were going on, that's warm. It understands my mind that she was no time. You know, right? You knew all that time. Listen, I think this will come to an end. You knew about the relationship, and you had your suspicions, and it was gnawing at you, and you were upset. You weren't going to have that farm taken away from you by Amy. That wasn't going to happen. You weren't going to have your children taken away from you by Amy. You weren't going to be jerked around for round number 2. After you weathered the storm 5 years ago, you went to the counseling, you did the right thing, and here we are. We're right back after commitments are made, and you allow her to try and rebuild trust, and here we are in the summer of 2018. Here we are right now, and Amy's doing it to Dad again. And now it's not just she's playing with you and your emotions and all the things that go with being a man when a woman does it to you. It's all the other things, Todd. And I know that was weighing very heavy on you, and there was a lot of things going on inside of it. And the evidence shows all that. That's done. In some of these cases, there's a great mystery as to why things happen. But here, the what's been determined, right? We know the body, the science is spoken. There's only one explanation for what happened. Now, there's only one explanation for what happened here. There's only one explanation. And there'll be only one explanation given, and that'll be hard and fast. But it will be cold. And people will be looking for the why. And they'll want to say, Todd, help us with the why. And I'm sitting here today, and I know the why. I know why you got to this point. I know why you got to this point, Todd. I know what happened that Saturday. And I know why you got to the point where you were so frustrated. And Todd, sometimes we do things we do bad things, and we try to protect the ones we love. We try to protect our children, try to protect those closest to us, and we do things that are not good things, and we do things that we wouldn't normally do. I know that, Todd. And I know there was a family. I can tell you, I've been a police officer a long time. I've been doing this 18 years now. And I remember a father, much like yourself, a good father, who lived down in southern Iowa, going to take his family up to Minnesota to fish in a cabin. And he had to work Friday. He had a tough job, and he worked, but he told his wife, I'm going to get out early, I'm going to pick you and the kids up, have this vehicle loaded, we're going north, we're going to be on the water by morning. I'm going to get you up to Minnesota. And they start this trip, and he works really early, goes in Friday early. He's exhausted, trying to be a good dad. Gets home late. Wife's kind of frazzled, right? But he's doing the right thing. His wife has 3 kids loaded up. They had 3 kids. And he jumps out of his work vehicle into their SUV, and they start north. And it's already night. He's already later than he wanted to get there. He's got a long drive up north, southern Iowa way up into Minnesota. And he starts to drive and gets food for the kids. I remember this well. And they get rolling. And you know what happens? You get kids with a full belly, everybody eats. Nighttime, you're driving, what starts to happen? Everybody starts nodding off, right? Nighttime, including Dad, who's trying to, man the ship, right? So he's just trying to get everybody up to vacation on time, be a good dad, keep his kids happy. He made promises to them. And it's nighttime, and he looks around, everybody's sleeping, wife's out, right? They're back there, and if you remember, they tell us not to do this, but 2 of the kids were sitting normal. One of them laid across remember how you used to do that, right? You just kind of laid out there, one of the third child laid out, one of the boys laid across the laps of the other 2 in the SUV on the back row. And Dad starts getting tired, Todd. And he starts getting tired, and pretty soon it's rumble strips, and we've been there. And then you wake up a little bit, right? And the adrenaline spikes momentarily. And he's like, man, I gotta stay on. I can't do this, right? I gotta hold it together for my family. And finally, he's by the Skunk River. I think on 35 is Skunk River. There's a river there. Pretty good size. Not really, I guess. Okay, it looks a good size river. It's called the Skunk River. And he ends up drifting off again, hits that left side, right? He goes over, hits the rumbles, but he actually hits that guardrail, which brings him to, jerks the vehicle back hard to the right, right? He's on the interstate, he's on 35, ramps it back, brings it all the way over, comes over and hits this side a little bit, and then brings it to a stop. And we get control of it. Gets out. What sounds like? Not nearly as bad as I thought it was, right? Stuff comes up a little bit, not bad. Getting back in. Everything, I think I'm okay. Starts rolling again, right? Just tries to keep moving. Pretty soon his wife's coming to. She's getting pretty hysterical. She's looking him back, and she's screaming at him. He's like, what, honey, wasn't that bad? And he pulls the vehicle over, and sees what's happened. and went left, and then he drifted right, he catapulted that sun right out the window. Straight to the window, right over the river, goes down in that river. And they stop, and he calls 911, and everybody's down there. 45 minutes later, they retrieve the body, but it's too late. Little boy's dead. He was dead. Tons of division and hardship in this marriage, right? Wife is mad at him, what are you doing, you know. He is beside himself, lost somebody he loves, and all he's thinking is, man, I wish if I could do this over again, if I could just have a do-over on this, there's so many things to do differently, right? I'm trying to be a good dad, I'm trying to do the right thing, if I could just do things over, right? And God, I know when I look at this situation, and I look at what the evidence says, and I look at how Amy was killed, and what happened, and I look at that perfect storm that swirled around this Todd, and I know what's going on in your life, and I can see that so clear. I can see every time, I can see your involvement in this, and it all says one thing. But the one thing it doesn't say the why, but I see the why now. We talked for a while time, and I know the why. Because Todd's getting hurt bad here. And Todd's trying to hold the family together, like you told me. You're trying to do what's right. Family is everything. Your family is everything. Todd, your family is everything. But sometimes all these years, Todd, all I've ever said, all I've ever said is I want my family together. I want my family together. That's all I've said. My family, my kids, you mean everything to me. Todd, they do by my kids. I love my kids so much. And I do. And God, sometimes people, we do things for those we love. We do bad things. But we do things because we try to protect the ones we love. And I know that here. I know you're trying to protect your family and hold them together. Even if Amy is doing things to rip that family apart, I know that you're trying to hold this together. And you were trying to do the right thing. God, I remember when I came home one night. I came home from work, and the neighbor is pissed off. He comes across the street, he's mad as hell. He comes across the street and says, come look at this. Come look at my truck. Takes me over, shows me his truck, big key mark right down the side, or rock mark, whatever it is. And I said, that's too bad, man. He's like, no, it's too bad because your boy's the one that did it. There's no chance, man. Boy would do that. Brady's better than that, right? I said, no way, man. And I said, here, I'm going to get him right now. Straight inside, give him the boy. This is man's truck. Get in the house. I didn't want to. I didn't say, get in the house. I'm sorry, I didn't see the red. I'm sorry, man. I have no idea. I leave my kid in his room for hours, right? My wife's like, hey, you think you should talk to me? Well, I know what's on there. It doesn't matter to me, right? Keep Laker's truck. Turns out the wife gets the bottom. What I find out, after I'm so red, I'm not even thinking straight, right? What I find out is my son had been over on the neighbor's house. The neighbor said something bad about me, right? Made a derogatory comment about me. So my son, and that guy goes inside, leaves me down, takes the rock, runs it right down. I guess back up to defend my honor, right? To defend my honor, okay? And so now when I find out later, I wasn't interested up front, right? All I saw was, this is what happened, right? I'm looking at the truck, problem, you did it, don't do it. Now I understand when my boy does something for me, right? It's wrong, but he did something for me. He was trying to protect me. He was trying to defend my honor. And Todd, I know sometimes we do things for people that we care about. And we try to protect them, but here's the problem, Todd, here's the problem. As this happens, and as this happens to Amy, and I know you want to hold the family together, and this thing happened, and you did not see this coming on this day. There was a lot of perfect strong things going on in your life, Todd. The evidence shows us that. And things were swirling, but things came to a head on Saturday. And Amy, things happened, and I know you weren't working this up for weeks and weeks and weeks and months, how you were going to kill her like this, Todd. But I know things came to a head. And I know about what happened that morning. And this happens. And doesn't things got out of hand. Saturday morning, things got out of hand for you. And then it's, oh my God, my family. This means more to me than anything. My family, this means more to me than anything. This is not going to happen like this. I'm not going to let it happen. So I know sometimes we do things because we're trying to protect the ones we love. You're trying to protect Tristan. You're trying to protect Taylor in this. You're trying to protect Wyatt. You're still, even in this, trying to hold that family together. And Todd, here's what happens when you camp out on that and say, I don't know, man. I didn't have anything to do with it. And we think we're protecting people. At this point, we're not protecting anybody. In fact, now you're the only one hanging out there that's saying, I didn't have anything to do with her death. I didn't know anything that happened Saturday. It's a big mystery to me. In fact, the case back shows Todd absolutely 100% that's not the case. I know that now. It's not. That's a foregone conclusion. I know. Can I see it? I know what happened here. Todd, you were there. You don't need to see anything, Todd. You were there. You were there. I wasn't the one that was there Saturday morning. You were the one who was here. What was something on in your head, Todd, when this happened? Because the explanation's going to need to be given for this morning. You don't want the evidence to drive this thing home. It's going to be cold, and people are going to be wondering, man, how did Todd get to that point? How did this happen? That's when you had to have this moment. And I know it wasn't something you were picking up, Todd. I know that in the heat of this thing, and Todd, I look at something like this and I say, Todd, don't force those closest to you. Don't make Tristan try and bury this thing with you. Tristan knows things weren't right there. He knows. You guys weren't together though. There was time when you and Tristan were not together that morning. I know that now. But you don't. Yeah, I do. Todd, it's done. It's done, Todd. Yeah. So we're done. So that we can't. I didn't come in here today to debate if this happened. I came to sit down and talk to you about the why at this point. And it's really important. It's really important. There's two guys sitting here. And I just want to hear from you, Todd. Is this something where you're sorry that things got to this point? Or don't you care? Or do you, as you sit here, a few minutes ago, almost in tears, you're telling me how important your family is. I believe that. I believe you. Well, you started talking about you started talking about 5 years ago. My emotions come back to me. Absolutely, they come back. That was my goal. That's why I did what I did. I mean, as far as making the here's a recommit. You're recommitted. That's why I did that. Here's an opportunity to have sex with another man in 2008. I mean, yeah, Todd, you were so mad about that. You felt betrayed again. And you saw there's no facts. Todd. And you knew what was happening. And there was no way in the that you were going to let things go down this way. She was not going to take all that from you. Not cheating on you twice, and then trying to take your kids, and then trying to take the farm. That wasn't happening. You weren't going to let that happen. And I understand that. I mean, are you sorry that something like this got to this point, or do you not care at all? Just something you just don't care. You're just going to tell me to. And I know that's not you, but I sit here with you. I know, Todd, I know you care about Amy. I know you love Amy. This isn't a situation that I love her with all my heart. Yeah, you do. And that's how things happen like this. You don't hurt Amy because you don't love her. You hurt her because you love her too much. You hurt her because you love her so much and she doesn't return that love. In fact, she betrays you. And that's why this happens. It's not that you don't love Amy. It's because you love her more than she ever loved you. And you know that's true. And I know that's true now. And I know you're sorry that this happened. I know as we sit here, you're so sorry this happened. And I know as we sit here that God, this is weighing heavy on you. It doesn't go away. Well, it doesn't move on. So now Tristan and Taylor and Wyatt, they need explanation. They'll see what happened. They're going to want to know. And they're going to need you to step up and be that dad that you told me that you are, Todd. You told me you're a good dad. I believe that. I believe you're a good father. I believe you're a good husband. Better than most. A lot of them would have been gone 5 years ago, Todd. You know that. Most would not have put up with round 1. Definitely don't want to put up with round 2. And they don't want to hear about pulling things out from underneath me. As you're being unfaithful, you're gonna do that to me too. You're gonna do that. So you're gonna dig a dagger into my heart, and then you're gonna play with my kids and my farm. No man can handle that. I get that. I get it, Todd. So as we sit here, I know this is the case of loving Amy too much. And God, I'm reaching out to Amy and just, maybe I don't know. I know you're in a hole here. I know this is scary, it's hard. I know you're hurt. And I know you think there's no way to talk to you. I want to be that guy for you, right? I just want to talk to you. I just want to hear from you. Tell me about how hard that was. Because I know it was hard. I know the trajectory leading up to this and this. I know how we get here, Todd. We both know how you got there. And it was a spontaneous. This was not a well-planned, well-coordinated thing. This is it. The perfect storm hit right here on that farm on Saturday. The perfect storm hit, and all those elements finally came and they converged. And Todd, it was more than you could bear. It was more than any man could bear. And I understand that. And people can understand that as we talk. What they can't understand is coldness, lack of explanation. That people don't understand. But they can understand when you and I talk, and they hear about the emotion that you were feeling come Saturday. When we talk about how things came to a head that day. And Todd was done. Todd was done carrying the water. Been carrying the water for a lot of years. Todd. Too many. And I know you want to do right by your kids. And the right thing at this point is to tell the truth. It's always good to tell the truth. You don't trust them that. Don't tailor that. Don't lie it. Telling the truth is always good. But now we can't just say that as a parent. You can't say that and walk away from this. You can't be that dad. You can't be that parent and tell them that lesson and then walk here. Sometimes we do bad things for the people we love and we try to protect them. That I understand. But we can't tell our children that telling the truth is the right thing to do and then walk away from a situation like this. We love them by living what we tell them, by living out what we do. We can't be something other than what we tell our kids to be. That's not fair to them. They deserve better than that, Todd. They need you to step up. They need you to be their dad. Even in this situation, they need you. They need you right now, in this moment. And I need you. Todd, are you sorry this happened? Are you not sorry? Are you sorry that, but you must know everything already? I do. Tell me both do. You tell me that. I didn't just tell you. I told you. And Todd, you know it even better than I do. Because I wasn't in that shed in that moment, was I? I'm just coming in and picking up the pieces afterwards. What we've done for 18 years, and then you tell me what happened. God, you know what happened. Well, so things got so out of control. Things got so out of control for you that Saturday morning, Todd. It was more than you could bear. You didn't plan it. It came to this point, and that was it. You didn't mean it to happen, but then things got out of control. And then it happened, and it was like, oh man. And now I sit down, and you gotta try and explain it. Your first thought is, take care of my family. Take care of this farm that I want to pass on to my family. Those are virtuous things, I get it. And you start to try and explain. But the problem is, Todd, that you weren't ready for this. You weren't ready for this moment. You were not ready for this moment, and you were not ready to try and not tell the truth when it happened. And that's when things they all start to just come unglued. They came unglued right before this. They came unglued in this moment. And I know, if you could do this back, I know you wish this wouldn't happen, but I know that. I know that. I know that if you could do a do-over on Saturday, November 10th, you would pull this back. You would just do a few things different. You just walk out of that situation. You just don't talk to somebody. But that's not how it happened. On Saturday, things came to a head, and they happened the way they did. And now it's time to be the dad that you tell your kids who you are. Man, don't let anybody else be right about you that thinks that you're something less than that. I know you're a good jury still has more to write, Todd. There's so much more to write here. But show yourself to be the guy that you told the children you were, that you've raised Tristan for 13 years. You've raised him to be you, which is what a good dad does. But you gotta write out the last, you gotta write these chapters that keep going in his life, and you gotta know that his dad was a stand-up guy. Such that when he did something, he did it to try and protect the family ultimately, and it wasn't the right thing, and you're willing to say, okay, son. Okay, son. He means that. He means that. He needs you to do that, Dad, for him. And those around him, God. Give him an explanation. God, you want to get me to confess or something, didn't you? Yeah, that's all I want. So I'm not interested in anything. I don't have an agenda. The only agenda I have, God, is sitting down with you to talk about that why. This is a done deal. This is a done deal. I think it's a done deal. If I then I'll already get arrested. Todd, that's not true. That's not true. You know, John, I know you can see the way forward here. I know you think you got this figured out. You think you can see the way through. You're a smart guy. You've done a lot of things. You've laid on your feet a lot. You're doing well for yourself. Here's one time in life you're not ahead of the game. You're not seeing this right. I'm trying to help you see it. You can't see the way forward here. The way without the truth is not going to be the way forward. We both know what happened on Saturday. We both know what happened. God, at this point, you're the first one that we're going to go and execute. Okay? I'm going to roll with that. I'm going to be taking some things from you. Okay? I'm going to take your... You can read this. I have a copy here for you. But I'm going to be taking Amy's cell phone. We're going to go get that. I'm going to take your cell phone from you. Okay? I'm going to take a DNA sample from you. We're going to take your fingerprints. Okay? We're going to take your full body photographs, and then we'll be going back to, we're going to go back to the farm where all this happened. And we're going to do a little more analysis there. The judges have looked at the evidence, and he's ordered that, in fact, this is what's going to happen now. Okay? So that's what we're going to happen. But Todd, before we do all that, before this continues, before this keeps moving down the tracks, I just want to sit here with you, two guys talking. These are final strokes. These are final strokes. All right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The mystery's going out of this one, Todd. Black and gold. And it is hard to wrap your head around that. I know. I know. I know it's so hard. I know you never saw 14 years ago when you met at that county fair. I know you never saw things going this way. I know you didn't see 5 years ago. I know you didn't see a repeat in 2018. I know you didn't see that same one that you gave your heart to, trying to rip the very things that mean most to you out from underneath you. You never saw that, did you? No, you didn't see that. You didn't see that coming. God, sometimes we do bad things. It doesn't change how much we love people. It doesn't even change who we are. But we do have to step up and be honest. We do need to tell the truth. Because those closest to you don't want that explanation. And I want to be the one I want to understand today. I want to have that understanding that comes from you.
Agent, after your interview with the defendant, what did you do?
So following the interview, I executed the search warrant that you saw Todd reading over.
And what was that search warrant for?
A number of things. It included a buccal swab or a DNA sample, photographs of his body and his major case prints, which is what we would call a full set of fingerprints.
And when you took photographs of Todd's body, did that include his hands?
Yes,
And
everything.
And did it also include his upper body, including his face and his neck and chest area?
Yes.
And did you observe any injuries on Todd's body at that time?
No.
And by the way, I know earlier you indicated that you also interviewed Jerry Frazier for approximately 1.5 hours,
Yes.
and that was a couple days prior to the interview you had with Todd.
Yes, it was.
And when you sat with Jerry for an hour and a half, did you also look at his hands and his face and his chest and neck area?
Yes, Jerry sat right next to me in my unmarked police car. I had an hour and a half, just a couple feet apart, and I was watching his hands and his face and couldn't see any injuries.
Now, later that day, after you executed those search warrants at the police station, did you then go to the Mullis farm?
Yes, I did.
And what was the purpose of going to the Mullis farm?
There are a number of additional items on that search warrant, as you heard me reference in the recording, some things that needed to be picked up that the judge had ordered us to do.
And when you were at the Mullis farm, was the defendant there as well?
Yes, he was.
And did you have the opportunity to talk to the defendant again?
Yes, I spoke to him in the driveway of the house.
And did you talk to him again about some of the events that happened on November 10th, 2018?
Yes, I did.
And again, did you indicate to the defendant that this was a homicide?
Yes, I told him that it was a homicide.
And did the defendant say anything?
He did not. I told him, Todd, this was a homicide, and we just want justice for Amy.
And did the defendant react to that?
No.
Did he say anything?
No.
At that point, did the defendant indicate anybody else that he thought could have done this?
No, he did not tell me anyone else that could have done this.
Now, were you present on the day that the defendant was arrested?
Yes, I was.
And what date was that?
February 28th of 2019.
And did you have a conversation with the defendant on that date as well?
Yes, I was there for the sole reason that I wanted to give him one more opportunity to try and tell the truth about what he'd done to Amy.
And at that time, was anybody else present for that conversation?
There was the initial arrest, and then those officers had stepped away so I could talk to Todd one-on-one for a little bit.
And at that time, what did you tell the defendant or say to the defendant?
I told him this is exactly where, when we'd talked several months prior, that we would be. The evidence had shown that, in fact, he had killed Amy, and that's why I was here.
And did the defendant say anything at that time?
No.
I'm going to interject an objection. It's infringing on the defendant's Fifth Amendment rights, this line of questioning.
Well, specifically the question that's been asked.
His silence and his right to do so.
Well, I'm going to allow this question. The last question was, did the defendant say anything? I'll let the witness answer that with a yes or a no. Go ahead.
No, he did not.
Now, Agent, At any point, or are you aware of fingernail clippings being completed by being completed and collected on Amy Mullis's body?
Yes, I am.
And do you know how or who collects those?
During an autopsy, the state medical examiner, as part of their protocol, will take fingernail clippings. They'll also take major case prints. Again, that's a full set of fingerprints from the deceased. We don't ask them to do that. That's just standard protocol during an autopsy.
And in this case, did you ask that there be any analysis on those fingernail clippings?
No, I did not.
Why not?
Well, in fact, although those are taken at every autopsy, I can tell you, having worked dozens and dozens of death investigations and homicides, oftentimes we don't submit those. That would be driven by the facts of the case, whether or not we would actually do anything with those.
And in what cases would you ask for fingernail clippings to be analyzed?
Fingernail clippings from the state medical examiner could be potentially helpful if you're dealing with a whodunit, some type of random attacker. But here, the evidence in this case over an extensive 3.5-month investigation, the evidence as it kept coming in continued to only point to one suspect. That's the defendant killing Amy Mullis. This was not a whodunit. It wasn't a mystery attacker. Therefore, fingernail clippings would not be particularly helpful in a case like this. So there's other reasons as well. When we look at a case like this, the medical examiner actually does a full external examination of the body before they actually cut the body open and do the internal examination.
Your Honor, could we have a question and answer here?
Go ahead, ask another question.
Sure, Your Honor. Throughout your investigation, did you have an opportunity to actually view the medical examiner report?
Yes, I did.
And did you also speak with the medical examiner, Dr. Cruz, on different occasions?
Yes, I did.
And did that medical examiner report indicate anything about Amy's nails, specifically fingernails?
Yes, so in the part of the autopsy that's labeled the external examination, the state medical examiner noted that the nails were short and intact. There's no reference to chipping, breaking, missing fingernails or any debris or anything that they noted under those nails that would draw attention to those and cause us to think that fingernail clippings would be of some value potentially.
I have nothing further.
Cross-examination.
Sir, where did that interview take place that we watched?
The Delaware County Sheriff's Office.
And that was on November 16th, 6 days after the death.
Yes, that'd be on the Friday following the homicide.
This interview process, I assume, how many years have you been an agent?
About 19 years.
And you've conducted how many interrogations like this?
Dozens.
And have you had training in questioning individuals, both witnesses, suspects, that kind of thing?
Yes.
Is there a methodology to how you were conducting this interview?
There is a process we would follow in interviewing people as well as interrogating people, yes.
Has that ever been referred to as the Reed method?
Not the method that I'm utilizing, no.
Okay. You indicated that Mr. Mullis didn't deny things. In my notes, you want me to confess to something I didn't do. Did you hear him say that?
Yes.
Isn't that a denial?
I would call it denial. No, I didn't murder my wife. That'd be a denial.
Is you want me to confess to something I didn't do, that's not an admission, is it?
No.
It's a denial.
You can call it what you want.
Okay.
I would not call it a denial.
And in here, if you look at the flow of things and listen to things, is it part of the plan that you really don't give him a chance to answer your questions? You just roll right into something else?
No.
So that's not indicated, right?
If you watch the 2.5 hours, Todd has a tremendous amount of opportunity to speak and does so.
earlier on in this interview process, the parts that we didn't see, isn't it true that you told Todd that the state or your office had the ability to draw from the cloud conversations that were going on in the Mullis house the morning of the murder?
I don't recall saying that exactly.
Well, I'm going to read from page 126. Conversations with you, other things going on. And Todd, would there be a reason as I'm listening back through Saturday morning that I would be hearing things on those cloud recorded conversations that are not, they are a little bit different than what we've talked about? Maybe that there was some things going on that Saturday morning between the two of you. Between the two of you, there's more than a little bit of emotion. Isn't that telling him that you were listening in on their breakfast conversation?
No, in fact, if you look around the context of those comments, I am telling him there's a possibility in a situation like this that Amy may have been activating her phone or using her phone in such a way that the conversations between the two of them that morning were not private. They weren't just between the two of them. In fact, they may be recoverable electronically. So I asked him hypothetically, would there be any reason if I was to listen back on those that I would actually hear it wasn't a friendly morning, but in fact, other things were going on.
Wouldn't it be a fair takeaway from this is that Todd never admitted or agreed, however you want to say that he was aware of this ongoing relationship between Amy and Jerry Frazier?
So he certainly says that he's aware and confronts the two of them. As you heard early on, he said that at some point he simply asks both of them and then he's satisfied with that.
Okay. And he said that happened earlier in the summer, didn't he?
He placed it in June of 2018.
And you had already talked to Jerry Frazier about this, right?
Yes, I had. I spoke to him 2 days before I spoke to the defendant.
And he had told you that Todd had called him
Yes,
and called his wife,
yes,
and that Frazier had completely denied that there was anything going on between him and Amy,
yes.
and that Todd seemed satisfied with that.
He hoped so. He was very scared that Todd would find out, but he believed that had satisfied Todd for the time being.
Did Frazier tell you that Todd had called back and apologized to both him and his wife for making that call?
I recall certainly in talking to Christy that there's maybe some kind of follow-up phone call.
On several occasions, Todd, in fact, refers back to, well, that was 5 years ago, right?
I don't recall specifically, but
Okay. I'm looking at a partial transcript here on page 137 when you were talking about this perfect storm thing. Todd starts to say, it just blows my mind that she was, and then you interrupted, well, Todd, and you said, and then you continue on with some more questioning. So, again, isn't Todd denying that he was aware of an ongoing thing with her and Frazier?
I'm not sure I'd get that from what you just read there, but
Okay. This fingernail clipping issue, you said, in response to a question from the state, there was only one suspect. Examining or looking into these fingernails wouldn't be helpful. I guess I don't understand that.
is there a question? I'm sorry.
Why was it not helpful or appropriate to look for anyone else?
Well, we don't go hunting for other people. We go where the evidence takes us. And in this case, from the first day that I'm involved, the evidence points towards the defendant killing Amy. There's the possibility of Jerry Frazier, right? He's a person of interest very early on. And beyond that, there's no evidence in this case file that would indicate anyone else was on that property. There's no physical evidence. There's no interview evidence. So there is no need to be looking anywhere else. We're open to all those possibilities. But We have to go where the evidence takes us. That's the only place where we can go.
You knew that Tristan had said that Todd was in the barn with him the whole time, right?
He said that during his initial interview with law enforcement.
Several times he gave statements to that effect.
I'm aware of the one with Special Agent Scott Rieger with the DCI and what we would call the lengthy or the interview that he did.
Wouldn't that alone indicate that there could be someone else involved in this?
If Tristan was telling the truth, right?
So you only investigate things when you think they're telling the truth?
Absolutely not.
Well, let's talk about what happened to Amy Mullis. She appears to have had a horrible beating. Wouldn't you agree?
There's other injuries on the front side of her body. She's found face down with a corn rake in her back, and those are the fatal blows.
And the medical examiner yesterday told us that she had defensive type wounds on her hands.
I didn't hear the medical examiner's testimony, but I know there's other injuries on her body.
So if she's getting attacked and she's trying to defend herself and she's getting defensive wounds to her hands, couldn't those fingernails have something to do with it or show us some evidence?
Again, the evidence in this case only shows two suspects. We don't have any other information that puts anyone else on that property.
So when you decide this is the guy, there's no more looking around.
No, in fact, this is a 3.5-month investigation. It's 40-plus interviews, 19 search warrants. We're, of course, always open to follow the evidence. That's what we're trained to do. And the evidence, as that investigation continues, always comes back to one person and one person only, and that's the defendant.
All I'm asking, sir, is could those fingernail clippings have led to some other part or more investigation?
Sure.
Okay. Sir, I know you touched on this, and if I wasn't paying close enough attention, I apologize. At the end of the interview, you said we're going to take fingerprints and photograph mugshots and a full body photo array. Is that correct?
Something to that effect, yes.
Okay. And that included Mr. Mullis being stripped down to just his underwear and his whole body being photographed from different angles. Is that correct?
Yes.
Close-ups of his hands and his feet and his face?
Yes.
All right. Similar to things that we have that's been produced by the state.
I don't know exactly what you've got there, what's been produced, but I did provide all the photographs.
But no indication of any injuries?
I didn't see any injuries on his body.
Okay. Thank you then. That's all I have.
Any redirect?
Just briefly. Agent Turbett, this happened in November, correct?
Yes, November 10th.
And do you know what the weather was like that day?
I don't recall.
Now, you indicated, or counsel just asked you that the defendant didn't have any injuries that you saw during the execution of those search warrants.
That's right, I don't recall any injuries.
And he also asked you about the fingernail clippings. Was there any evidence of any injury at or around Amy's fingernails?
No.
Now, the defense attorney also asked you about the Reed method of interrogation. Are you familiar with that?
I am.
And do you have extensive training in interrogation?
I do.
And can you just briefly explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that training is?
I am, at one point in my career early on, I've been through the Reed training. That's fairly standard interview and interrogation training technique. It's a 9-step process that's taught to some police officers.
And what interrogation technique did you use in this interview?
So we actually, inside of the DCI, and I'm actually part of a research and training group, there's other methodologies that have evolved out of more recent research.
I have nothing further.
Sir. Sir, I believe in the response to one of the redirect questions, you said that there was no injuries to her hand.
Objection, Your Honor, that was not the question.
Well, I'm going to let him answer. Go ahead if you remember.
I believe the question was specific to the fingernail area on the hands, and I did not recall any injuries. What I read on the autopsy report is the fingernails were short and intact, and there was no note of any damage to the fingernail areas.
Have you looked at State's Exhibits 41, 42, 47, and 48?
Not that I recall right now.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Would you please state the exhibit number and describe what you're seeing?
41 is the right hand of the victim. There's some, generically I would say there's some bruising on, it looks like there's purplish, maybe bruising on some knuckles, and there's a dark spot on the back of the right hand. .42 is the front side of the right hand. You can see looks like a cut maybe down near the base of the hand. A little hard to tell over on the wrist. 48 would be again the right hand. You can see the top or the back side of the right hand. Again, some purplish, maybe bruising or marks and a small cut, maybe a cut up on the pointer finger knuckle. 47 is again a different angle of the victim's right hand. You can see some abrasions, maybe an abrasion on, again, that right pointer finger. Down at the knuckles, you see some purplish discoloration, a small cut, a dark spot on the back of the right hand.
Thank you.
No, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you, sir. You can step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Any other witnesses for the state?
Not at this time, Your Honor, the state would rest.
Okay, very good. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the state has presented their evidence. We're going to take a short break and talk about defense witnesses. I'm going to give you about 15 minutes. Remember the admonition I gave you before. Report back to the jury room.
All right, to the jury.
Okay, the record should reflect that we are outside the presence of the jury. We are still in the courtroom with the defendant and the attorneys. The state has just rested. Do we have any motions that we need to take up before we start with the defendant's case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead, Mr. Firehelm.
Your Honor, at this time, the defendant would make a motion for judgment of acquittal and dismissal of the charges. And in support of that motion, I would state to the court, the elements of this offense of murder in the first degree is that Todd committed an act on Amy, that Amy died as a result of that act, and that he acted with malice aforethought. And also that it was a willful, deliberate, and premeditated with specific intent to kill. What the state has proven here, Your Honor, is that Amy died. And she died, obviously, as a result of criminal behavior. What the state has not shown is the evidence that Todd committed this act, and that caused Amy's death. Even when viewing the evidence in the light most favorable to the state, no evidence has been produced that Todd was the person who attacked Amy. Their witness, Todd Mullis, establishes that Todd could not have done this crime. They were together the whole time, only out of sight twice to get 2 drinks of water. I understand that there was a change in his testimony about 1 minute and 45 seconds to, I don't recall what the time was, but I believe that we have a time marker here in that his testimony established that he took 2 drinks of water from a hose in the office area of the hog barn, and then returned to the barn where he again saw his father working on the hog pens. Again, even viewing the evidence in a light most favorable to the state, to imagine that Mr. Mullis, because, let me back up, Tristan also said he did not come out through the office area and out that side door that was shown in the photographs that were introduced. So the only other option would have been to travel, either walk, jog, or sprint to the way back end of the hog barn, out a door, up along and side of that long building, which has been described as a football field approximately, go into the shed, attack Amy, beat her up, and kill her with this corn fork, and then return to the barn without any signs of dishevelment, injury, excitement, lack of breath, appearing perfectly normal to Tristan when he came back in the barn from these 2 drinks of water. The other evidence that the state has presented as to statements that Amy had made to others that have been shared are they in themselves are not consistent, such as her frantic calls to people at the hospital, Deborah Sherbing, I believe, I may be saying that wrong, when she heard from her friend Terry that there were rumors again. And I believe that Patricia Christofferson said that, I believe the next day, that she was contacting her in a very normal fashion. But again, these statements being made by Amy Mullis at these times to these different people are being made while she's engaged in an extramarital affair. She's unhappy, she says, with her marriage, even though she disguises that in her relationship with Todd. So that these statements, again, I realize you have to take them at face value, are still suspect. There's no evidence by internet or by statements or hearsay from Amy conveyed to other people that there was any conflict from the end of August when this rumor thing occurred, which Todd and Amy talked about, that there was nothing there of conflict from then until her death. Jerry Frazier continued to be a farm manager. No animosity or trouble between he and Todd, even though they had frequent contact. No issues between Amy and Todd. And in fact, the only thing that occurred during that time period was apparently sometime around the middle of October when Todd's mother chastised Amy for the amount of time that she was spending in Des Moines, I believe, because of an uncle's health issue. Todd had shared by text messages that we saw with her friends, Terry Stainer, mostly, that yes, it was bothering him that she was spending so much time away from home, that this was a tough time, that there was field work and rainy weather and he had the kids and so forth. So, but that's not the controversy that I think the state is trying to paint out here that would lead to this blow up where Todd would violently and viciously kill his wife and the mother of his children. So I would submit to the court that the granting of a motion of judgment of acquittal is appropriate at this time.
Does the state want to respond?
Your Honor, at this time, the state would object to the court entering such a motion as Rule 2.19 sub 8 of the Iowa Rules of Criminal Procedure states, the court on the motion of a defendant shall order the entry of judgment of acquittal if the evidence is insufficient to sustain a conviction of such offense or offenses. In this case, it is clear that the evidence is sufficient to sustain a conviction. In fact, when you take it in the light most favorable to the state, when it's uncontroverted, it is way beyond a reasonable doubt. There are 4 elements to the marshalling instruction, and they were set forth by defense counsel. The state has cleared each and every one of those. And as far as Tristan's statements go, they were totally mischaracterized by defense counsel. Tristan said that he was out of his father's sight for 2 drinks. Not the other way around. Tristan said he didn't know how long his father was out of his sight. Those are 2 wholly separate things. While it may seem like a subtle difference, it is a huge difference. Defendant was out of Tristan's sight for nobody knows how long. So he could have and did commit these crimes. The credibility of the witnesses are for the jury to decide. The weight of the evidence is for the jury to decide. It has been admitted. What we know is defendant was on this farm. His family was on this farm, and no one else was on this farm. The murder occurred between 10:14 a.m. and 12:01 p.m. He had planned this for almost a year. If you look at the Google searches, he was looking at potentially drowning. He was looking at potential firearm accidents. He was looking at potentially starvation, dehydration, freezing to death, hunting accident, burning, and then bodily organs, which right before the stabbing or the impalement says a lot about this case and this man. This is clearly a case that should go to the jury, and the state has cleared defendant's request for motion for judgment of acquittal, and it should be overruled.
As counsel indicated, I have to take this motion in the light most favorable to the non-moving party. Weighing the evidence that we've had so far, there have been witnesses who have talked about the defendant's statements, things to the effect of, I'm not going to give up half of what I've earned or accumulated. I'm not going to give up half the farm. We do have the internet searches on the device from the home. We do have the defendant there at the scene in close proximity. And in light of all of the testimony from all of the witnesses, including the statement that we watched that the DCI agent took of the defendant, there certainly is evidence that the jury could use in this case to find that the state has met its burden of proof. The motion for judgment of acquittal is denied. Any other motions from the defense at this time?
No, Your Honor.
From the state?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. You all need a 5-minute break or so before we start with the witness. Let's take a short break.